We have a shocking Leafs update to go over today as moves have been made surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs that have big implications going forward. We're going to break that down as well as discuss some big updates surrounding John Tavares and his future in Toronto following some new reports that have dropped revealing some big information. But before we get into it all, folks, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys again for your continued support over here. There's a lot to go over today, and of course, we are in a very intriguing part of the offseason now. Moves are just around the corner. The draft is just around the corner, but we have some big updates surrounding one prospect in particular that is very intriguing. But we also, of course, stay tuned to the end. We have some John Tavares updates and new reports that have dropped. But let's start with Topi Namela, and this one's interesting. We covered it in a video a week or two ago briefly, but it is official now that Maple Leafs top prospect from a few seasons ago, once a top 3 prospect for the Leafs, Topi Namela has signed a 1-year contract with Sweden's Malmo Redhawks. The Maple Leafs will still hold his NHL rights. So at one point was, a Kyle Dubas, what was declared as a bit of a Kyle Dubas finesse in order to trade back in the draft to acquire him. Now he is gone, and in all likelihood, we will never see him in a Toronto Maple Leafs uniform. And this is, it's an unfortunate scenario here, but it was never going to work out. At least seemingly, he never got a chance to play consistent time for the Leafs.
Yeah, and it was looking like it was going to work out at some point. I mean, up until this season, it looked like at some point he was going to be in the NHL, an NHL player, and they were kind of waiting on him. But, this season, things took a turn, and I don't think that they saw him as that option anymore and that he wasn't going to progress to be an NHL defenseman. And again, he's a smaller, skilled guy, kind of from the Kyle Dubas and Wes Clark era, of course. Like, all of that is gone at this point. So, the Leafs have moved on to a different philosophy in terms of the players that they're looking at and the way that they want to play. So he's moving on. Now, there is an interesting little thing to this. If they do qualify him, which again, they would have to qualify him coming up next week, they would retain his rights and he could come back. He could play with the Toronto Marlies, with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So obviously it's just something that maybe he's going to, get a change of scenery, play in a different place, maybe get some confidence back as well. And then maybe one day he returns, but I don't think that's very likely. I don't even know if they're going to qualify him or have any interest in doing that. I'm just saying it is an option that is something that they could do. So it's going to be very interesting. But again, he was at one point, maybe even, last year, still considered one of the top prospects in the system, and he's just walking for nothing at this point. So I think they're completely redoing and how they think about the draft, like I mentioned, with some new personnel. And, it is a new era for that, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but it's going to take some time to see those players back. And obviously the cupboard is a little bit bare. So this is not necessarily good news today, but it is something that I think, the writing was on the wall. A lot of people saw this coming, but again, there's some avenues for him to come back. I just don't think it's likely at this point.
Yeah, and we had some videos touching on it, both as a trade piece, as someone who could make, the team, not necessarily at a camp last year, but we've been talking about a lot on the channel, and he heads overseas. Man, it sucks that Toronto couldn't leverage him and Hirvonen as a trade asset at some point, given their draft position. The trade down with Ottawa, getting Clevin, aged to be hilariously meme-worthy, unfortunately. So, obviously, the good news is, Kyle Dubas is gone, so we don't have to worry about those things happening. Even Wes Clark is gone, who did an okay job overall, but they have a new philosophy now, new front office. But at the end of the day, let us know down below what your thoughts are. The defenseman that, at one point, the Leafs, for the past however many years, were lacking defensemen. You can still argue they're lacking some in that regard, but they're a lot better than they used to be. So it's interesting. He's gone now, and I highly doubt he's ever going to return to the Leafs, although they still hold his rights. So if anything happens, we'll keep you up to date with that, because pretty sad way to end what was hopefully going to be a one of the top prospects, especially given the trade and the hype around it at the time, the praise that Kyle Dubas was getting for trading down with Ottawa, all these different things. Age bad. Clevin, of course, with Ottawa is doing great. But Darius, let's dive into some big other updates now, because we have a John Tavares update now. This one's interesting. We've been talking about it a lot here on the channel, of course, but it came out a day or so ago that regarding John Tavares, it sounds like the Leafs have offered a 3-year deal worth under $4 million a season. So that was the initial report that came out. We covered that, and then this morning on the Fan Morning Show, Frank Saravalli says he hasn't heard the Leafs are offering Tavares under $4 million, but there should be a compromise between that and Brock Nelson's 3x6, which, guess what? In between 4 and 6 is what we've been talking about a lot here, $5 million. We'll have another video coming out as more news and more news drops. I mean, things are really starting to pick up now. Zegras just got traded, a bit of a, finesse there by the Flyers, but that's, of course, conversation for, another day. And if you're a Flyers fan out there, let me know down below your thoughts are. Tavares, under $4 million, kind of refuting the report here, contradicting the report from, I believe it was David Pagnotta, whoever it was on, I believe it was David Pagnotta of the fourth period. Frank Saravalli saying he hasn't heard that has been offered, but at the same time, he thinks they can get somewhere, in the middle there, done at around $5 million.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what they're aiming at right now. Now, listen, take a lot of this with a grain of salt. There's conflicting reports at this point. maybe I don't think Tavares and his agent are negotiating necessarily through the media, but there's always some of that stuff. Of course, I think that's more heavy with Mitch Marner and Darren Ferris, but take everything with a grain of salt at this point. Maybe they offered him $4.1 million, right? We don't know exactly right now, but we do know it's kind of in that ballpark. That's what we know for sure. So again, are people comfortable with a 5x5? That's something we've been talking about the last couple of days. It gets the AAV down a little bit, and a lot of people might say, what do you mean down a little bit? If Tavares goes to the open market, we've talked about it a lot, he's going to get 8. I think he could even get 9 if he wanted because of what he brings to the table. And again, Steven Stamkos, worst year last year, got $8 million. Like, we have to keep that in mind, right? For 4 years. So it's going to be somewhere in that ballpark. And if he wants to sign for $5 million, I think that's fair. Gets it down a little bit. Obviously, Chris Tanev, his contract is kind of a comparable in terms of the length and the fact that you can get the AAV down. OEL signed a similar contract last year, right? We can't forget about that. So that could make some sense. But again, it really comes down to, because we've heard that they're far apart in negotiations. Now Frank Cervalli saying that, he hasn't heard that they offered them something that low, even though that's literally how negotiations work. So I'm not surprised if that was true. And then obviously there's other reports saying that both sides are kind of frustrated. And I understand why. I think Brad Treliving's saying, listen, we're not going to be taken advantage of anymore. Gone are the days everyone, hey guys, everyone gets a piece of the pie, 11 million, sure. And we find no success. I feel like they're trying to rid themselves of that and have a new philosophy and a new identity in the front office. And then if you're John Tavares, or looking at John Tavares, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, things get done because of deadlines. There's a deadline coming up. And I think the question is going to be, how badly do you want to be a Toronto Maple Leaf? You've made the majority of your money through your career so far. And if you really, really want to return to be a Maple Leaf, then it's going to have to be for significantly less, because that's just the direction we're going in. And one thing that's been lost, and I know a lot of people are turning on a lot of players, and I get it. I'm kind of sick of some of these guys as well because they haven't found success. But at the end of the day, you have to see it through. The new captain is Austin Matthews. This is Austin Matthews' team. So I feel like they're trying to create a scenario similar to what Connor McDavid has going on in Edmonton. Yes, he has Draisaitl by his side, but everyone kind of answers to Connor McDavid, and I feel like they have to start to create some of that as well, where it's not the 4 guys that you answer to or anything like that in the room. It's Austin Matthews' team. He's the captain, and you fall in behind him, and that's the way it should be. And I feel like that's the way most teams operate. Of course, everybody has to pull their weight, but there is a captain, right? So I feel like that's kind of what they have to go with. And if John Tavares is not part of that, it's not part of that. Again, at the end of the day, huge John Tavares fan. I think he's a great player, and I still think he has great value for the next couple of years, but you can't go out of your way to give the guy more money just because it feels good and he wants to be a Leaf or anything like that. There's still a team to build here.
Yeah, James Myrtle, it's harder than the Leafs expected. There's a little bit of frustration on both sides, so things are taking an interesting turn there. We'll have another video coming out on it. More and more things are dropping, so it's going to be interesting to see, especially as they start to look at and peruse some of their other options that are available. How much are some of these other options going to cost for the third line centers, second line centers? I think the Leafs are looking at it and paying him as a third line center because that's probably what they expect going forward rather than what he was last year, even though that's probably where some of the frustration is brewing. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know below your thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.